Against Nature by Joris Karl Huysmanns. So this book, I think, is a pretty good example of big things, small packages, because despite its brevity, it caused quite the stir when it was published in France in the 1880s, I believe, due to its distinct break with the naturalist school of writing, which was the predominant literary mode at the time, as well as its rather decadent sensibilities. It is notable as well for being implicitly the scandalous tome in Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray, which corrupts the titular character and sets him on his downward hedonistic spiral. Now, the plot of Against Nature can be summarized quite quickly because it has virtually no plot at all. The main character, or perhaps I should say in this case just the character, because really there's only one character in this book, is a man named Deicide. Deicide is the last scion of a family of French nobility, who, thanks to generations of inbreeding, is severely defective. He's very feeble and weak physically. And he is afflicted with a slew of health issues and is also extremely neurotic. But Deicide is a man of rather Epicurean leanings, you might say. Thanks to his inheritance, he has been able to live a rather luxurious life in pursuit of whatever pleasures might strike his fancy. But eventually he becomes kind of burnt out with everything, with sex, with loads of different types of art, as well as just kind of burnt out with people in general. And so he decides one day to up and leave the world behind, basically. He buys a house in the countryside that's rather isolated, and he decides to furnish this house with lots of works of art and literature, which are to his preference. And he's just gonna, chill, just live the good life, surrounded by artifice, things that are artificial, but which are aesthetically pleasing to him. So that's what he does, and he lives that way until his already poor health at last craps out on him, and he is forced to return to society for the sake of his life, basically. That's the book. That is truly the plot of this book. So I'll say this up front. This book is, I think, what you could call a rant novel. I'm just using that as kind of a colloquial term to denote a work of literature which exists primarily just so its author can air their own sentiments, can kind of just talk about whatever the hell they want to talk about. Not actually, unlike this book right here. This, I would say, is also something of a rant novel, you might say. But let's talk about the technical aspects of this book. The writing in this book is quite good. It is very strong. The prose is very, very elegant. There are a lot of very, very well worded and poetic passages in this. No complaints at all with the writing. As for the character, and again, there's really only one of Deicide, he is an interesting character, but dang, is he kind of very, very unlikable. He is a pompous little prick with a massive superiority complex. And really, I just could not like him in this book. Now, I won't say that he is a badly developed character or a flat character necessarily, but he was not really sympathetic, at least to me, at all. But another thing about this book is that the way that the character of Deicide is developed, and moreover, really just the way the entire book is presented, it's kind of just like one long info dump. There's not, I don't think, a whole lot of showing in this. It's a lot of telling. So much telling, but that, like, Deicide still comes out, reasonably fleshed out. But like I say, this is what I would denote as a rant novel. And so, because of that, it's just basically Deassign's opinions, which are really, I think, um, Joris Karl Huysmanns' opinions, that are just kind of vomited out through this book in the form of this story. So it's kind of I found it to be a lot of telling. His Deassign's backstory and his tastes are kind of just told, but again, there's enough of it to where it works out mostly in the end. As for the story, like the plot of this book, like I said, it doesn't really have one. Nothing happens in this book. So that's all I really have to say about that. Now, to talk about my reactions to this book, I'm going to say this. I liked Against Nature. I did. However, I fell quite short of loving it. I really was not uh, nearly as enamored of the book as I thought I would be going into it. Um, and yeah, I like it, and moreover, I respect it in a lot of ways, which I'll get to. But really, it kind of just bored me. Like I can appreciate the consummate craftsmanship which is on display, and I can even kind of just appreciate the fact that this guy wrote a whole novel just to talk about whatever he wanted to talk about, because each chapter in the book is basically dedicated to a different subject, such as art, literature, horticulture, and various other kind of musings. And I can kind of just respect that this guy wrote this book just to do that. But it wasn't very engaging for me. Now you might say, but if you liked this book so much, because if you followed my channel, you know I do adore this book. You might be saying, well, what's the distinction? I mean, if both of these books kind of do the same thing, it's just a, a, a fictitious skeleton on which the author wants to hang their various ponderances. Now, why did you like this so much more than this? Well, I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One, the stuff that the author wanted to talk about in this book, I found much more interesting than what this author wanted to talk about. There was a lot more that I got to chew on out of this book than this book, but also this book, even though I would still say this is kind of a rant novel, this book still does have some kind of plot. Now, granted, it doesn't really come to much, it doesn't really come out like I think a lot of people who read this book were wanting it to, but things do happen in this book. Nothing happens in this book. I mean, nothing happens in this book. And so it kind of just wears thin after time. It does. It really bored me after a time. And the real saving grace of it, I'll say, is again it's brevity. Um, but it is a very well done book. There is a real skill in this book, which I can appreciate. And also, as I said, this is a book which, even though I really wasn't just enamored of it, I can certainly respect in some ways. And that has to do with the fact that this broke so sharply from naturalism, because naturalism in France at the time that this book was published was the prevailing mode of literature. It was basically led kind of by Emile Zola. Now, naturalism, it's not very far removed. In fact, it may just be kind of potato for like that, what in Russia would be denoted as socialist realism, um, which has to do with a certain outlook on the world, which is, I will say, very, very materialist. There's it takes a very, very unspiritual look at human life, um, a very kind of, again, materialist perspective on things, very deterministic, kind of very detached in many ways, very kind of removed in some ways, and in some ways kind of fatalistic perhaps. But this book is not. The driving force behind what plot this book has is a spiritual crisis in the main character. Dasein is fed up with the world, and he is, moreover, kind of disgusted with a world that he has come to view as being rather base and ignoble. That's why he wants to surround himself with works of art and literature which do actually appeal to him, because he views them as more aesthetically and also more spiritually fulfilling, because they embody higher principles than what common society has to offer. And Joris Karl Huysmann eventually became a rather devoutly Catholic man, and this book tends that way towards the end. It's definitely has a kind of a pro Catholic, pro church kind of message at the end, as Dasein kind of resigns himself to the fact that maybe his fulfillment needs to come from something even higher than man-made creations such as art. And I really can respect that, because I personally don't think materialism is a healthy or even correct way to view human life. And I think denying the kind of spiritual aspect of man, even if you don't like believe literally in like an undying soul, I think to pretend that there isn't an intangible, abstract quality to human life can is not conducive to a healthy worldview, I think. And so I really can respect Against Nature for including that, for breaking from the kind of mechanistic outlook that naturalism had, kind of deterministic and again very very materialist perspective, and portraying something that is more spiritual, that portrays something deeper than just um, pleasure and desire and those kind of like base aspects of human character. So I really do respect this book in a lot of ways. But like I said, as much as I can respect it, I didn't really just love it. I did like it because again, I can just kind of appreciate the fact that this guy just wrote this book to just talk about whatever he wanted to talk about and kind of air his opinions through this character, I guess. Um, and some of it's really interesting, but some of it did get dry after time. It really did. And also, there towards the end, he makes some Dasein, the character makes some comments that I really did not. I really wasn't feeling where it's so snobbish and elitist, and also so anti-American. I mean, I wasn't exactly like chanting USA, USA whenever I was reading the book, but at the end of the book, Dasein views France as being corrupted by like Americanization, because of like the burgeoning middle class, which he just disdains in this, because his old money aristocratic mindset just views them as just uncultured heathens, and he's like, our society is ruined because of industry and the commodification of everything that America has done, and now these brutish, petit bourgeois people they're just destroying culture. And I'm like, again, this dude is such a kind of just a pompous little ass in this book. I did not like his character at all. And I was kind of, I wasn't really feeling that. I was like, I think you should kind of take a harder look at yourself, perhaps, at what you're saying with some of these comments. But anyway, so to rate Against Nature, I'm going to give this book a B plus. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. And again, I did like it, but I fell quite a bit short of loving it, because it's kind of just it's not very engaging. I found it's rather dry after a time, even though it does have many admirable qualities to it. So yeah, I'm going to give Against Nature a B plus. So Against Nature by Joris Karl Huysmann Have you read Against Nature? Let me know down in the comments if you have, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said about it here today. And if you haven't read Against Nature, I really don't know if I would recommend this, honestly. It is a good book. I want to say that again. Objectively, it is a good book, very well written. But I really don't know if I would recommend it because it's a book that I think a lot of people just won't enjoy. I enjoyed it up to a point, but I think a lot of people out there will just kind of be bored by this book. And honestly, I didn't find it terribly profound. Not nearly as profound as this book again. Um, but if this sounds like something that's up your alley, if you want to read a book about a burnt out aesthete who retreats to surround himself with books and paintings and flowers and then gives his opinions very kind of just in an info dump manner on those things, then pick this up. But if that doesn't sound like something you want to read, then I would say steer clear because you might not enjoy it. But as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.